Well, greetings, friends and neighbors, and welcome to another episode of Freedom Fighters. My name is Richard Andrew, and we are coming to you live from the Hope Recovery Center in Corona, California. It is the home of Hope Radio 247.com. And as always, you can listen live, obviously, at their .com on the internet. You can also listen live on their app, which is available in the Apple and Android marketplaces. It's a free download, so you can grab the free app and you can actually listen to all your favorite content live, or you can go into the archive and you can listen to all the episodes later at your convenience. As always, the digital cameras are rolling here in the studio, and that means that we are live on Facebook. So we want to say hello to all of our friends watching online on Facebook. And as always, whenever this episode ends, Facebook is kind enough to archive the video, so you all can watch it and you can share it later with friends, family, loved ones, coworkers, anyone that you think might have a direct interest in today's topic. Maybe it's relevant to their journey or to the journey of someone they care about and love. Be sure to share the video with them. I will also be sharing the link to the audio-only podcast on the Freedom Fighters Facebook page. And as always, you can find that information on the Hope Radio 247.com internet radio show Facebook page. Man, that was a lot to get out. That was a lot. Today we have Sean in the booth. Molly is usually in the booth, but Sean is manning the knobs today. How are you, Sean?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well, my friend. I'm glad that you're here with us today in the booth. I have to admit, I kind of miss seeing you in there, man.
I know.
It's been a while.
It's been a long time.
So I miss
Like
Molly,
6 months.
but dude, 6 months?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Wow, that is a long time. So anyway, Sean is back there, and if y'all want to call in, as always, you know that you can do that. The number to call is area code 712-775-8984. And when you call in, you're going to be prompted to enter a code, and that code is 205492. And that's going to ring Sean in the booth, and then he will determine if he'd like to connect you with us in the studio. But as always, we invite you all to join the conversation. I have to admit that I was sitting in here sharing with my guest about the Hope Recovery Center and about their vision before we went on the air, and then I looked at the clock on my phone, and I saw that literally the seconds were dwindling down, and then I could hear the bumper music playing, wave a hand, and I knew that I was out of time. So I actually did not get an opportunity to pray with my guests, so I want to take care of that very important issue right now. Father, we come before you in the precious name of your Son, Jesus, and we just invite you, God, to come now and just be a part of this conversation. Not only be a part of it, God, but we pray that you would just guide it and that you would lead it and that you would direct it. We invite you to be here with us in the studio. And we pray, God, that you would bring to the surface whatever it is that you want to communicate to the listeners today. Some folks are watching live. Some folks are tuning in a week later, a month later, maybe even a year later. Someone's accessing the archived video or the podcast. God, you see the end from the beginning, and you're not bound by our constraints of time. So I pray right now that, again, you just use us, that you use us to communicate hope and healing and strength and restoration and freedom to each and every person that's listening today. And God, I just pray for a very special anointing to just rest on my guest. And I pray that you would use her mightily. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. So, joining me today in the studio. By the way, I have to tell you all that there are only 2 more episodes of Freedom Fighters before the end of the year. Today's episode and next week's episode, and then I'm off for the last 2 weeks of the year because I'm running around ministering to folks. And I'm so glad that we were able to get this guest in before the end of the year. I'm going to tell you all why a little later in the show, but it just was important to me to get her in before the calendar year ended. So I just want to just kind of do a little bit of foreshadowing by telling you all that. I'm going to tell you why later in the show. But Dr. Marianne Cintron is my guest today, and she's sitting in the table. And Marianne, welcome to Freedom Fighters.
Hi, it's great to be here.
I'm so glad that you're here. There's the applause track. Thank you, Sean. She is definitely worthy of that applause. And before we continue, there's actually someone off camera sitting here in the studio. Marianne, who's with us today?
My wonderful husband, Will.
Your wonderful husband, Will. Greetings, Will. Our friends can't see you, but or hear you, but we're glad that you're here with us. And why don't we start here, Marianne? For folks that don't know you at all, never met you before, never heard of you, can you just give them the Reader's Digest version of who you are? Are you married, kids? Well, we know you're married. You just talked about your husband here with us. A little bit about who you are.
Sure. First and foremost, I'm a believer in the Lord Jesus Christ.
All right.
I've known the Lord for about 34 years. I've been happily married for 29 years to Will, and we have 3 wonderful kids. We've got, they're all adults, Randy and Richard and Laura. We live in Glendora, and I've been an educator for 19 years.
Wow.
And 17 of those years, I've had a passion to work with dyslexic or at-risk kids or struggling readers.
Wow. Wow. Now, I know that I introduced you as doctor. Can you tell us a little bit about that doctorate?
Yes. I got my doctorate in education, leadership, and administration. However, the research that I did for my doctoral dissertation was working with at-risk kids. Those are those struggling readers who were starting in the 10 to 20 percentile range, which is, do I have a picture of it's very low on the chart.
Okay.
And I wanted to use a reading program that I had found successful in a private practice that used phonics, and it partnered it with music. And I was having such great success with the students I was working with over a 5-year period that a school district was gracious enough to let me do my doctoral research there. And we worked with 30 students. Half of them used the music with the phonics, and the other half did not use the music and just did the phonics program alone, which was called Reading from Scratch. So what we found after 12 weeks of intervention was that all the students with the phonics program had achieved up to the 40 percentile rank, which is the low end of the average.
Okay.
And those that used the music achieved the 60 percentile rank. So there was significant improvement with all the students. However, the ones that used the music had additional significant improvement. And so the 60 percentile rank put them on the other side of the average ranking. So this was something that I had been seeing, and I've been talking to school districts about it, but never really had a platform other than to provide an after-school intervention with it. And I'm just very honored now to be able to bring this out worldwide to let people know that a missing component was music, and there's a way to get accelerated results with students that are struggling readers, at-risk readers, and we're even free to call them dyslexic if they are dyslexic students.
Wow. Well, I know that folks that are familiar with me in my ministry, based upon what you've just said, they just had their aha moment, right? Hearing you talk about music, and they're like, aha, now we see what RA's interest and passion about this particular guest is. Now, I come from the generation of, hooked on phonics. I mean, back when we were kids, they launched this big thing, and obviously I understand music from what you just shared, but can you explain to me real quick what phonics is?
Sure. Phonics, what students who are struggling with reading lack is the phonological awareness. So phonics is a lot. It's a lot of things. It's learning how to segment sounds in a word, learning how to sound words out from beginning to end, learning how to substitute sounds, how to delete parts of words, substitute parts of words. It involves rhyming. It involves just the fluency with reading. It involves recognizing the words that can be sounded out and sounding them out. And it's nice that you were familiar with the Hooked on Phonics, because I had, in my teaching experience, my first 4 years in education, I was a classroom teacher. And that 5th year, I actually went on my own to pull together a reading program that would help dyslexic children, because I was starting to see a need there, and I had joined some professional organizations. One was the International Dyslexia Association, and one was the Association of Ed Therapists. And in both of those organizations, I was learning all about dyslexia. I had to actually leave the classroom as a teacher to learn about it. And
Wow.
When I was doing my own private research on pulling together the best practices, which was a lot of the phonics programs, Patricia Cunningham, Patricia Kuhl, and I learned about the reading from scratch. It seemed like an accidental outreach that I did. I was trying to learn about the Orton Gillingham-based program, which is a buzzword now, Orton Gillingham. And I Googled Orton Gillingham and read about Sam Orton working with Anna Gillingham. And together they spawned what is now the International Dyslexia Association. But they were talking about a multisensory approach to learning, which includes the visual, the auditory, and the kinesthetic hands-on components. So the phonics program you were using probably did a lot of those. And I emailed dyslexia.org, which actually got me to a woman who created the Reading from Scratch program. Wow. And she was one of my mentors for many years. She was willing to talk to me about how she was using music to help dyslexic children, and what a breakthrough it was having in the classrooms she was teaching in Massachusetts. So she was my mentor for about 5 years, and I found that the missing piece to what I was working with kids with was music.
Music. Wow, wow, wow. Now, for those of us that don't know, can you tell us in a nutshell what dyslexia is? I think that a lot of us, me anyway, I think that the first thing that comes to my mind is, oh, isn't that when someone reads backwards or something? You know what I mean? So what is dyslexia?
Yeah, that's really interesting, because even as an adult, I'll be writing and I'll catch it and I'll fix it. If I write the wrong letter, or make a letter wrong backward, I'll even do that. But you catch it, and I call that overload. We're just rushing. But children with dyslexia are missing syllables when they write. They're missing letters when they write. They'll add letters that don't belong there, and they'll add syllables that don't even belong in a word. When they write a sentence, they typically won't capitalize the beginning of their sentence. They forget the punctuation in their sentences. They really struggle with quotation marks, where to put commas. They put the L that would be in words in the wrong place. They will say the word from instead of farm. They will say hat instead of hot. They get their vowels really mixed up.
Okay.
And a lot of that has to do with the right side of the brain taking over the reading, when the left side of the brain should be the dominant language center for reading.
Okay. Wow, that's interesting. Now, does this affect, obviously we're talking about reading and comprehension. Is this affecting like how they're writing also?
It does. That's right. A lot of times when you look at the writing of a dyslexic person, it's illegible. And
Wow.
You can't make out some of the words, and I would have to have them read to me what they wrote, and sometimes they can't even remember what they wrote.
Wow.
And what's really interesting with the music component, when you put music in a single ear put in the left ear, it crosses over to the right side of the brain, particularly the right angular gyrus, which loves music.
Mm-hmm.
So then when we work with the reading from scratch, we would put phonics in the right ear in a single input, and that crosses over to the left side of the brain.
Tell me real quick, what is that? Okay, obviously I know what you're saying, music, you're going in, whether it's, Mozart or whatever.
Right.
But phonics going in, what does that mean? Is that a voice talking to them? Is that
That's right. So with the reading from scratch, which was a reading program, Orton Gillingham-based reading program intended with dyslexics in mind, Dorothy Vandenonner created spelling tests that the kids would be given every time they had a session. So 5 days a week, they're doing a spelling test. They're having the hands-on manipulating letters with these pretty colorful little letters.
Okay.
They manipulate sounds. Then they read the sounds in a phonics book or on a computer. And then they are working in a workbook. And then they take a spelling test. And when they take that spelling test, it's about 15 to 20 minutes. And they put it's on a CD, and if they're using their computer, they can put that CD right in their computer. That CD is listened to in the right ear.
Okay.
And then that's when they're going to play their music in the left ear.
Okay.
And she coined the phrase enhanced lateralization. So she calls it EL for short. So music to the right side, phonics to the left side, and that's what's retraining the brain. And I equate it to when the music is going to the right side of the brain, it's giving the brain something it really loves to do. So then the phonics is going to the left side, and it's like a Pilates of the brain. It's very concentrated, training the left side as the language center. So the students aren't regressing. They're not forgetting what they're learning. And it builds in that emotional security when they go from test to test to test, and they're seeing their success, not in just writing the words, but in writing sentences containing those words.
Wow, it's there's so much here. I mean, just in what you already shared, there's so much there, and I'm passionate about so many different aspects of what you're doing right now. For those of you that don't know, Marianne and I were initially connected through her husband. I was at a men's event ministering, and I had actually known him from previous events and previous fellowship, but I had no idea about what his wife did for a living or any of the things that she was into or passionate about. And he came up to me and he said, "Hey, I just want to share with you," and he started to tell me about a book she had written and some of the work that she had been doing, and obviously the element of music, the role that music played in these different processes. Now, he shared those things with me, not knowing that one of the things that I like to do in my free time is watch TED Talks. I just happen to like to do that. I'll punch one in and press play, and then the internet takes over and it just starts playing them back to back, And I had recently watched a series of TED Talks that spoke specifically to the use of music in the areas of brain development and learning. And, Marianne called it like the brain doing Pilates, right? It's like, I totally get what she's saying because I was watching some of these studies that these doctors were doing. And it was just amazing. So now it's not about a TED Talk with, someone I'll never meet in my life. It's like now I've got someone right in my life, in my sphere of influence, that I'll get to meet in person and talk about these things. And I think it's so important because I'm passionate about young people as well. And I'm passionate about learning disabilities because one of our kids, struggled with a learning disability. And it was a weight, if you will, that she had to carry not only through elementary school and high school, but even into college, even into the college years, carrying this issue and this struggle. So I'm super duper passionate about what it is that you're doing, Marianne. I really, really am. And I want to make sure that we talk a little bit about your book. So could we just maybe take a quick little left turn here and have you share with our listeners about your book?
Okay, so my book is called The Message of Hope, and it actually got published in May. It was a little early. I started writing it 7 years ago when I started working on my dissertation, over 7 years ago, but
Wow.
I actually started compiling the stories, which were case studies with students that I've worked with, in January. So the Lord pulled it all together from January to May. And I remember right around Mother's Day, because my son gave me a balloon, Happy Mother's Day, and I wrote, my book's published. So A Message of Hope, it's a compilation of the 17 stories of working with students who were at risk And my dissertation has over 50 scientific references of the resources that talk about music in the brain, the use of music, the benefits of music. It talks about the left hemisphere being the language center of the brain, and how dyslexic children, how now we're able to do functional MRIs, pictures of the brain, and as children are reading, we're able to take pictures of their brain. So those are called functional MRIs, or the functional brain scans. So the research shows that the brain scans are showing kids who have dyslexia, their parts of the lobes of their brains are not lighting up. In some reading programs, they'll talk about the frontal parietal lobes. With the reading from scratch, she focuses on the left and right angular gyrus, and a lot of people are familiar with that. And she talks about the corpus callosum being the central part of the brain, which acts like a lazy referee. So if kids are reading and they're having words being sent to the right angular gyrus, it'll go to the left side, but it'll get messed up because that lazy referee, corpus callosum, will send it over just either slow, hence we have our processing, auditory processing, visual processing disorders, or it'll send the word over incorrectly. It'll give a different vowel. So the kids are really struggling with their words because the right side of the brain, the right corpus, the right angular gyrus is dominant when it should be the left angular gyrus. So the book really talks a lot about the right angular gyrus, left angular gyrus, corpus callosum, music, language center, what the research says about how beneficial this reading from scratch book is.
Yeah, you know, I just love the name of the book. I mean, come on, A Message of Hope. It's
Yeah,
like, I just
right?
love that. And man, there's just so much, you know, and you know, I know time is just so important on this show. You know, when I think about, you know, from an outsider in, and I try to put together like a hypothetical, and I'm thinking about a young person, a child, that may be struggling with dyslexia, and then thinking, okay, so how did it show itself? Let's say it showed itself through poor, you know, reading comprehension scores, or failed spelling tests, or however it showed itself, but yet it's not quite identified yet. And then I'm thinking about how kids constantly looking at those test results or those failing grades, paper after paper after, and how
That's
that could
right.
maybe translate into anger, bad behavior, and it just seems like it's a child acting out, or it's a child that's just bad and lazy and doesn't want to and then it's like, how do you get through all that stuff to identify that it's dyslexia?
That's just a great segue into talking about one of my favorite children's authors, Patricia Polacco, who was dyslexic. And she has a story about struggling and kids rejecting her and just feeling hopeless. And one of her teachers understood how to teach her and understood that she needed to have her hands-on. And he used that multisensory learning technique with her. I'm holding events with a gentleman called John Rodriguez, who is a dyslexic adult, and he is an ice sculpturer. But
Wow.
he goes around talking to kids who have dyslexia, teaching them how to do computer coding, how to build robots, race cars, and actually build computer games.
Wow.
And part of his testimony is he did great in school and kindergarten, but in first grade, oh my gosh, he just took a dive, and he just couldn't learn. So with him, it was recognized right in first grade. When I worked at a private setting, Foothill Christian School in Glendora, I worked with kids who the teachers recognized were falling behind, so all the way from second grade to 8th grade. And I worked with about 10 students, and so the teachers recognized them. They're not keeping up with the class. Their writing is far below par. And they recognize those symptoms, you know, adding syllables and letters and not being able to write, and their comprehension really lacks. So teachers identify it. And unfortunately, in the public schools, the teachers don't really have that freedom to say this kid's struggling as much as this student because, the numbers of kids in special ed is so high. 1 in 5 kids has dyslexia. So that's 20% of the classroom.
Wow.
So there is a mandate in California. It's called AB 1369. That is legislation requiring schools assess for dyslexia and provide the intervention. And this was a requirement last school year, 2017 and 18.
So this is brand new.
It is. And nationwide, every state has their own legislation. But it's real. So that's why the timing of this book is so important, because
Yes.
now the schools have to address it.
Yes.
And some schools are still afraid to say dyslexia. So we say our struggling readers, our at-risk students. However, some kids are still not qualifying for those assessments. And that's part of what the book is addressing. It's a message of hope to those parents that there's something they can do in the private sector. They can, outside of the school system, they can see what symptoms look like if their kids have dyslexia and what they can do to offer intervention. One of the things I would do as an ed therapist is train teachers, whether individually or as a group, in the reading from scratch, and also train parents, or if the parents have an aunt or an older sibling that would want to work with their younger child, I could train that older adult how to do that. And when I was at Foothill Christian, there was the student I worked with had a younger sibling that was only in first grade, but because dyslexia is very likely genetic, the parents recognized it right away. And so I was able to work with that student, not with the music, but with the phonics intervention. So if there's a genetic knowledge that, aunts and uncles or even parents have dyslexia, it's very likely that the child will have dyslexia. And you want to nip it in the bud. If you can address that issue and start remediation, first, second, third grade, even kindergarten. If kids aren't learning to rhyme when they're in kindergarten, if they're not showing the first signs of understanding, beginning sounds, what are the ending letter sounds, what's the vowel sound, if they're not starting to learn that a little bit, then those could be red flags that the child has dyslexia.
Yeah, I love that you identified some red flags, because you said that apparently there's some measure of to qualify for to even be assessed.
That's right.
I guess it's like some measurement of failure.
That's right.
I mean, that's how I'm hearing it. So it's like, how much failure do we allow before the screening?
Well, interestingly enough, our special ed classrooms are filled with dyslexic children, and they don't need to be in special ed. The research that I did with statistics from Massachusetts and in Texas, 85% of kids in special ed have dyslexia. So some of them also might have ADHD, ADD, which is the predominating identifier of why they're in special ed. But if their dyslexia can be addressed, they could exit special ed. And that's where God had put that passion in my heart 17 years ago, that we could save the nation billions of dollars, because some of those kids are in special ed and they don't need to be there. They just need a good intervention program, and they could exit special ed.
What a huge statement that is. I mean, my goodness, it's funny, you're talking about how, like, you have this passion for this particular topic, for 17 years or however many years, and then just recently it happens to be a law, put in place that's got to be identified and it's got to be addressed. So now this is like the law of the land.
That's right.
And here, sitting across from me at this table is a lady that, not even knowing that she spent the last 17 years preparing herself to be an amazing resource for kids here in our communities in Southern California, or even around the U.S. I mean, like, she has been taking in all of this data, all of this information. She's been watching children, working with educators, working with even medical professionals about how all of this stuff's affecting the. I mean, she has gotten all this information in us, and then someone comes by and runs a pen across a piece of paper and says, "Now this is the law of the land, folks." I mean, this is the resource here at this table. This is the resource. School administrators, school boards. I mean, you want to come into compliance with whatever the man. I don't know what the law is, its verbiage is, but if you want to come in compliance with it, here is your resource. Here is your resource. And she's taken all of her knowledge, all of her experience, all of her passion, and she's taken a few initial steps. Obviously, she's written a book, A Message of Hope. So that's part of this process for her, this journey for her. Mm-hmm. She has just recently launched a nonprofit. She just finished all that paperwork and all of those hoops you've got to jump through to get a 501c3 here in the United States. She has gone through those hoops. Those wheels are right now turning. So she's got a book. She's got a nonprofit being formed. She's getting everything ready and prepared. All of those foundational elements are getting put in place to help you respond to the law of the land. I mean, it's like, I feel so honored that I get to sit with her knowing the impact that she is going to have in the lives of, thousands, maybe even millions of generations of young people are going to be impacted by my guest. And I just talked a little bit about the nonprofit. Can you piggyback on that and share a little bit about that with our listeners?
Yes, thank you for all that. And that's very touching to me because I never knew where God was leading me with all this information. And the scripture, Jeremiah 29:11, that he knows the thoughts and plans he has for me, for hope in the future. Yes. And I'll share the mission statement of Step-by-Step Dyslexia Solutions. So we believe that we're here to assist dyslexic children to realize their full potential and positively impact their communities. And we do this by helping them improve their literacy skills. So our overall goal is to improve their quality of life, provide a quality education, and instill in them a hope for their futures. So what I'm doing with Step by Step is training college interns to work with the dyslexic children, and we could say struggling students, in an after-school intervention. And that does two things. Not only is it giving the schools that extra support they need, because not all those kids are going into those programs. It's a Tier 3 intervention, and I'm teaching the college kids how to work with these students, getting the college kids prepared for careers if they decide to stay in education. Mm-hmm. I think we're losing a lot of our college interns because they're going into the restaurants or into the supermarkets because no one's drawing them into education at this point.
Right.
So I have the privilege of being a teacher trainer for school specialty, which has the SPIRE curriculum. And this is a curriculum that is Orton-Gillingham based, which is what the mandate requires. And it's embraced by California, and this SPIRE curriculum is embraced across the nation. And this is what I'm teaching my college interns. So they're actually using a program that the schools, it can be piloted into the schools, and hopefully the schools will embrace. This is a 10-step program. And it's a little different from the Reading from Scratch, which is pretty much, outside of the school district. Mm-hmm. If parents want that extra intervention because their kids aren't in those programs.
Okay.
So that's how that differentiates. But, God has given me the understanding, not only with the International Dyslexia Association, working with SPIRE, training administrators and training the reading specialists what Orton-Gillingham-based curriculum looks like. And then electing to choose to train the college kids with that, but at the same time being very passionate about the music, and instead of 10 steps, there's 5 steps. So the music combined with a 5-step program is making significant gains in just 12 weeks. Kids are making 1 to 3 year gains in 12 weeks using the music.
What?
And they're making 3 to 5 year gains in a year using the Reading from Scratch with Music program.
Goodness
That's tremendous.
Gracious. I mean, come on. This is
I have a
Wow.
story of working at a middle school, and there was, my interns from Azusa Pacific were working with the interns in Pomona, and there was a young gal, 8th grader, whose mom was in jail, and she was being raised by her grandpa. And after 2 or 3 weeks of using the reading from scratch, he told me he was recognizing she was getting along a little bit better with him, and she was having a little bit more interest in her schoolwork. Well, with this after-school intervention, we only did 6 weeks. And at the end of that, she had made such significant improvement. He came to me and he said, "What have you done with my granddaughter? It's amazing. No other program after school has ever helped her like this." He said, "Our home used to be a battlefield." He said, "She gets along with her siblings, she gets along with us, and she's interested in her schoolwork now." And he said, "This is a miracle." And he said, "Are you a doctor?" And that was one of the things that put me on the trajectory to go get my doctorate, because this was something that had to get brought out to the public.
What's mind-boggling to me is that you dedicated so much of your life, like wholeheartedly, to this, almost seeming like you could be pouring all of your time and resources into this thing, this pursuit, right, of growing in this area. And maybe even do it for what? I mean, maybe outsiders were looking like, what's the point? Like, you find out everything you can about dyslexia, and then what do? Because, but yet this law is in place. I mean, all these different things. I love the story that you just shared, because now you're talking about my territory, right? Where people are brokenhearted. People are hopeless. It's like, okay, what's at the root of that thing? Well, at the root of this thing is that I feel broken. I feel worthless. I feel stupid. I feel all these things, right? Because I can't get this. I can't wrap my head around this thing that everyone else around me is learning like in their sleep. And I can't get this. And now how am I showing you that I'm struggling with it? Well, I'm not sitting down necessarily and telling you, I can't read this sentence, I can't spell this word. Instead, what I'm doing is I'm lashing out in my behavior. I'm speaking negatively. I have no interest in anything in school because this one area is such a struggle. I don't want to talk to you. I'm antisocial. I'm angry all the time. Whatever it is.
That's right.
Right? And so I love this story because this one issue in learning has had this ripple effect that has affected so many areas of her life negatively. And of course, it's spilling over into the family. And just by addressing this learning issue, all of a sudden, there's like a rainbow, like there's a light at the end of the tunnel for her, right? She can smile again. She can sit down and talk to granddad again. It's like, come on.
Yes.
Come on.
And the thing is, if she hadn't received this intervention, she could be another statistic of going to jail. And our jails are filled with, the statistics show 48% of our jails have the people that are illiterate.
Yes.
How many are struggling that we could help?
Yes. And how many their behaviors, their bad choices, their bad decisions were a direct reflection of the struggles they were having learning that ended up making them feel just worthless and hopeless and broken. And it went from a learning thing to actually an emotional thing, because then it started triggering all their negative emotions, right? And the fruit of that was bad choices, bad behaviors, and then the fruit of that, incarceration. I mean, so it's like taking this thing back, right? Taking all these things back to wherever it originated from. And it's like, guess what? There's Dr. Marianne right there at the point of inception, ready to address that thing there and avoid all this other stuff. Come on. I mean, some might say, hey, you're really reaching, RA, thinking that this is going to affect the crime rate. Yes, it will.
That's right.
I mean, come on.
Because these kids are ending up on the streets. They're continuing that, the poverty, the homelessness, the helplessness. And we want to provide that intervention and let them have a hope for their future. And the other thing is, kids with dyslexia are very creative. They're average or above intelligence. And, Steven Spielberg had dyslexia, Tom Cruise, a lot of our actors, Winston Churchill, Einstein. You know, we have people that have
Wow.
dyslexia that were, you know, in our history, historians. So they're very creative, and man, if they could just tap into that. And we have a structure in our classroom that is not compatible for dyslexic people because they need to be moving, they need to be interactive, and we're doing more of that in the classroom. But because our classrooms are also so language based, because of the state standards, it's hard. And these, you know, even the state tests are very, very difficult for our students that have dyslexia. And they need to know that they're creative people. They just need to find how they learn and tap into how they learn and be successful.
Okay, so I really want to like this clock is already working against me. I really, really want to maximize the time that we have left. So I want to. Okay, so let's say I want to speak to certain groups of people. Let's start with parents. If there are parents listening, or friends, family, someone who knows a parent that has been, you know, wondering or struggling with their child's struggles in a certain area of learning that's around, you know, reading comprehension or spelling, those types of things. So if there's a parent that's just wondering, like, I wonder what my child's issue is. So they're not necessarily identified as being dyslexic at this point, but they are struggling in some of the areas that you and I have mentioned in this conversation. What does that parent do? What do you recommend they do?
Call me.
Yes, yes.
Parents can call me, and I'll be happy to give them a 15-minute free consultation.
Free?
Free.
Okay,
And we can talk about what next steps would be,
okay.
because I can assess their kids, and a letter from me that they can take to their school district will help them get their child the intervention that their children need. And parents can simply ask their children the days of the week, the months of the year. Do they know that? A lot of dyslexic kids can't remember the sequencing of that, which is very interesting. Multiplication tables are really difficult for dyslexic children. In my last district, I was teaching a reading intervention that was, I think, maybe a tier 1, and I was also teaching math. And the same students that were in my reading program were in my math class. There were a lot of them were dyslexic, or they had, and we say they have the symptoms of dyslexia. Well, whether they're diagnosed or whether they have the symptoms, we treat them all the same. We need to teach them the phonological awareness. So what parents can do is call me. I have a website, and they could email me through my website or just email me. My email is mcintron@stepbystepdyslexiasolutions.com.
Can you spell Cintron?
Cintron.
Okay.
And dyslexia is Dyslexia.
Okay.
I had the hardest time learning that. And then my website is www.stepbystepdyslexiasolutions.com.
Okay, and the phone number?
626-664-9392.
And we'll repeat that at the end of the show, friends. So I asked her about parents. Okay, so now the next group of people I want to ask you about, how do we talk to them, is I guess we could put them all in the pool of educators, but I'm thinking not just teachers, like teachers who are kind of conscious about these struggles and are interested in ways to address it, to see their students, you know, flourish and get past these hurdles. But also, I guess in that same educators bucket would be school administrators, school boards. What do we say to them?
Okay. The reading programs that are being taught to teach the teachers the Orton Gillingham curriculum, those are going to be your English teachers, and they're going to be the special ed teachers. So they're getting some of that training already with their schools, and they should be. But this book would give them extra encouragement to talk to the parents of those special ed kids. In the school districts, so the other teachers who are teaching history and science and math, they're not going to these interventions to identify dyslexia, and the kids are acting out in their classes. And so they need to know that, that kid has dyslexia and needs a little bit of more intervention. And since reading and writing is really a strong component of history, and reading and writing is a component of science, they need to see what what will help their students. So this book is just knowledgeable for all educators to get.
Okay.
And you know, like I said, the first 2 years that I was a teacher, I never really understood what dyslexia was. I never even heard of it. And if there was a book like this when I was a new teacher, it would have opened up my eyes to a lot. And the school districts are always purchasing books for their new teachers and all the staff. You know, let's all read this. Let's read about behavior. Let's learn how we can help Johnny with his behavior management. Well, let's let all the teachers learn about dyslexia. It's like the Cliff Notes, if you would. The
Yeah.
Cliff Notes of dyslexia.
Yeah, it almost seems like it should just be part of the standard employment package. I
Yeah.
mean, you know, you guys hire a teacher and you say, you know, here's, I don't know what information you put in the packet, but maybe this book should be in that thing too.
And one more thing with,
Yes.
you know, when I was on the campus, now for the last 4 years, 4.5 years, I taught math. And what I noticed were a lot of the kids, middle school and high school, having the earbuds in their ear, wanting to listen to music. And if 1 in 5 kids has dyslexia, which is what the research is showing, I would just really encourage the schools to set some boundaries, but allow these kids who are struggling to listen to their music, and specifically in the left ear. And I had one of my middle schoolers that I worked with, and I had him from 7th and 8th grade, and he was, excuse me, he said he had dyslexia and he was ADHD. And he was very open telling the class about that. And he said, but I take Ritalin, and I love listening to music. And he told me, the Ritalin calms me down, but the music helps me learn.
Wow.
And he had music written into his IEP, and he's a senior in high school now. And his mother, I just ran into her the end of the last school year. Music was in his IEP all 4 years because it helps him. So I think teachers and administrators need to listen to that and let music be a part of those students' lives. And of course, boundaries have to be set, but it's going to help them calm down. I met last week with an administrator of a behavioral school, and she said every student in her class she lets listen to music in one ear because they need to listen to the teaching with their right ear.
Yeah, obviously I'm a champion of that. I'm trying to wrap my head around something that you had mentioned. I think you said that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think you said that it's about 80% of the students that are in special ed possibly
right.
have dyslexia.
That's right.
Is that correct? Okay. So with that statistic in mind, and then I'm also looking at the new guideline, law, whatever the word is, that says now you have to have some filter or test in place to identify dyslexia, and then you have to have a resource to address it. So if I'm thinking to myself, the standard run-of-the-mill, just average public school out there, up to this point, or maybe pre having that law put in place, I don't know if that's the percentage of kids that are in special ed. Does that mean that the
challenge.
special ed curriculum is built around this, but not specifically addressing dyslexia?
That's right.
Wow.
Because in special ed, a student individual plan, we call the IEP, education plan, has accommodations that will help the kid be successful. So we're repeating directions, we're checking for understanding, we're providing larger print, we're helping them with their organization of notes. We're doing all these things hands-on. We're using colors on the board, which is great. You know, color highlighters, markers. But they need the phonological awareness. And that's where the SPIRE curriculum, and there's other curriculum out there that is Orton Gillingham based, that is amazing. But that's where that school needs to be teaching that Orton Gillingham based curriculum to those special ed kids. But dyslexia is also a general ed student issue. So that's where there's been such a challenge, because the kids in general ed have dyslexia, kids in special ed have dyslexia. That's why we want to come with our interns and help support what the schools are, and they're working so hard. I mean, it can take hours to assess a dyslexic student because it's the school psychologist that's doing it. It's not the teacher, it's the psychologist. And then they're getting samples of all the students' works, and our psychologists work their tails off. And the speech
Wow.
pathologists are doing some assessments.
Well,
So-
okay, so what does it look like? I'm a school, I reach out to you. I want you to, your response or the response plan that you put together based on whatever I told you is that you want to place an intern or multiple interns into a school system. What does that look like? Are they there during the school day? Is this after school? What is this?
Okay, that's a great question. The intervention that the interns are doing is after school.
Okay.
And then as the teachers are working with their classes, 50 minutes of their reading class should be doing phonological awareness, and those are the credentialed teachers who have been trained in a reading curriculum, and I strongly recommend the SPIRE curriculum
And
because that's where I train.
so let's say that that these teachers in the school board or the school administrators decide that a step they want to take in the direction of becoming compliant with these new guidelines and rules for educators is that they want some of their teachers to be, I don't know, prepared or gone through this training, accredited. I don't know what the word you just mentioned.
Certified.
Okay, certification. So, and obviously you are equipped. Your nonprofit, you are equipped to respond to that need. Is
That's
that
right.
correct? Okay,
That's right.
so they reach out to you, and then they send their teacher or teachers through this process with you of getting certified, and now they're certified. So I just want to tap into every resource, okay, that Dr. Marianne has for you. So obviously the interns with this after school program working directly with these kids, she can actually prepare your teachers, your educators, to become compliant in being able to identify dyslexia.
Right, identify and
And-
assess their and work with their students.
And work with the students as well. So I mean, man, you're like a one-stop shop. I mean, literally.
Well, there's three things going on. One is to get that excellent reading program into the schools
Yes.
that the schools can use today. The other thing is to train the interns to use that program as well to provide opportunity for community service for them in an after-school program. And the third is using the music with a different reading program that's not recognized by California, but it is recognized in Massachusetts and on the East Coast, and that's the reading from scratch. So that couples the music with the phonics, and that could be done in a private setting.
When I think about the fact that even these these official standards or rules or guidelines, laws that have just come into place a year ago, since it's so fresh in like really addressing this need, it seems like this is the perfect time to implement the musical aspect of this, since it's all very brand new. In other words, they didn't come in with this guideline or this standard 20 years ago, right? And now someone's trying to come and alter the standard. It's literally brand spanking new. And I think that every school, administrators, your school boards, and you're in the process where now you have to take your first step into this. Man, I highly recommend that one that implements the music, and not only for my obvious selfish reasons, my selfish connections to it, but just based upon what I've been told, what I've learned in my research for information, things that I've learned directly from Dr. Marianne. And it just makes sense to me. Like everything you say about how the brain is operating, about the left ear, the right ear, all these different aspects of that process, that you even talked about some statistics, like 40% of the kids, they were on this side, 60%, which put them on the other side of it's like everything that you've shared just tells me that
The music helps.
yes,
It's
it helps,
phenomenal.
and it's really almost a no-brainer. And I really feel like you all have nothing to lose by going the route, considering it's a brand new season for how you all address this need. You know what I mean? So she's not trying to come in and like revamp an existing system. There is no system. Okay? I mean, she's here to create the system, to implement the new system. I mean, friends, come on. I just sometimes I go off on these rants on the show because I'm just like, it is such a no-brainer. no-brainer here. I mean, and let me tell you, if you're a parent and you're hearing this program, and it's possible that your teachers did not tune in to this program at any time and really don't know anything about it. It's even possible that there could be some teachers out there that may not even be aware that the standard is in place, dare I say, and that it's supposed to be implemented. The process of identifying the kids that are struggling with dyslexia, and then also implementing a way to address it. Some teachers, because it's so brand new, may not even be aware that this is a thing yet. Okay, but you as parents who have children that you're concerned about, that you love, you want the very best for, obviously, and you're seeing them struggle in this area, I would encourage you all to reach out and connect with Dr. Marianne. But not only that, but to turn right around and talk to your teachers, talk to your school board when you go to the meeting. Like, bring this stuff up. It is so important. I'm not telling you that your little one's going to end up in prison, but I am telling you this, that you could alleviate some of the pressures of being young, of going through puberty, of finding your way with the sea of stuff that our kids have to go through. You know, peer pressure, finding your identity, learning, growing, going through acne, going through style, going through music, whatever it is, right? They've got so many things. You could actually alleviate the pressures of one of this. They're so important because it could affect so many different areas of their lives in a negative way. Okay. I'm going to end my tangent. Okay. Dr. Marianne, we are down to just our last few minutes. I want to take for sure the last minute to just revisit all the different ways that folks can contact you, you know, from your email address and your website and your telephone number. But before we get to that, do you have any final words that you may want to share with parents or administrators or school boards or just anyone that's listening today?
Yeah, I just want to say that Dorothy Vanden Honert, who's the author of the Reading from Scratch program, went to conferences in the 60s by Dr. Roger Sperry and Dr. Gazzaniga. They were the scientists who worked with seizure victims, and they learned that the right side of the brain works independently from the left side of the brain. Mm-hmm. So Roger Sperry won a Nobel Prize for this in the 80s. And he said, and Gazzaniga shared that at his conferences, that if educators would tap into this information and bring it in the classroom, it would be amazing. So this woman pioneered bringing this music with phonics, creating a program where it's very easy to listen to the music while you play the phonics. A lot of the reading programs aren't doing that because, you know, there's 10 steps, and they're quick steps, and maybe the music isn't compatible with that reading program, but having music in the background is going to be helpful. Sure. It's not the enhanced lateralization that we are endorsing in this book, but music in the background, letting the kids listen to music when they're studying. I would really encourage the schools to find a way that they can allow the kids to listen to music and not have it be a consequence. So that would be really helpful.
So good. Now, how can folks get the book, A Message of Hope?
So A Message of Hope is available on Amazon, and it's available with Barnes & Noble. I was excited to have 2 book signings at our local Barnes & Noble.
Nice.
And educators can buy it at Ingram Distribution at a discounted price.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I encourage you all to definitely do that, to share that book with, again, your teachers, your administrators, your school board, and even parents.
That's right.
I mean, come on, it's even for us. Now, again, can you go through the various ways that people can connect with you, starting with your website, your email address, and then your telephone number?
Okay, my website, excuse me, www. Step-by-step dyslexiasolutions.com. My email, mcintron, C-I-N-T-R-O-N, at stepbystepdyslexiasolutions.com. My phone number is 626-664-9392.
Friends, my guest today was Dr. Marianne Cintron. We've been talking about dyslexia. We've been talking about learning disabilities and how music can help with that journey. Please go check out her book on Amazon, A Message of Hope. And like she said, you can visit her online at stepbystepdyslexiasolutions.com.
Yes.
All right. God bless you all. Have a great day. We'll see you next week. Bye.